Hello. Welcome to this special episode of Terminus. The death metal guy couldn't make it today. He's hungover listening to Enmity. I am here with Arjan from Heidens Hart Records. How's it going, Arjan?
It's fine, thanks. How are you?
I'm all right. We've just dealt with a few minor mic difficulties, and now we're rolling in. So yeah, Heidens Hart is sort of the core label of the Dutch scene, and Arjan has also played in a lot of bands, and I'm going to try to rattle them off, and you tell me if I'm, missing anything. But we got Cultus is the main solo project that you're known for. Then you've got another one called Heervader. Then you are currently playing in Sagenland, whose record we reviewed a few weeks back, and as well as Untar. And as far as projects outside the Netherlands that I've been following, you were in Heimdallswacht and Pest from Germany, not to be confused with Die Pest from Germany. So I was thinking first. So we should maybe talk about that recent Sagenland record. So first, Oale, how do you pronounce the title, first of all?
I would say Oale Groond.
All Groond?
Oale Groond, yeah.
Groond,
obviously, this part of the Netherlands has the harsh G, which the whole world probably can't pronounce without getting a sore throat. But it's the which is pretty common in the Netherlands, at least the northern part. So, and grond, it just means like soil or earth or land.
Okay, cool. So yeah, no, a lot of those, I feel like the Dutch bands often bring that out, and I think the guy from Tarnkap really gargles the sort of.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, and also coming out soon is Ôfstân by Kjeld. How would you pronounce that?
That's actually in Frisian. I don't speak Frisian, but it's Ôfstân.
Okay.
Ôfstân.
And so Frisian is that's a North German language?
Yeah, it's a mix of German, Dutch, and English.
All right, cool. So
maybe the word mix is not. I'm pissing some people off. It's not a mix. It's actually an official separate language. But I guess it grew from the Germanic language tree. So it evolved into Frisian, while other trees branches evolved into Dutch and German and English and Danish.
Yeah, I get that, because there are mentions of Frisians as far back as the time of, Beowulf or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they were just up there with the Saxons and the people who became the Dutch, right? So, So that's one thing, I suppose, that these. So we'll be reviewing Ôfstân, obviously. Kjeld is sort of the, I feel like the full spectrum black metal band of this scene. Full lineup, big sound, closest to the '90s Scandinavian sound. How would you describe what you're doing with Sagenland?
I would say Scandinavian style black metal, and like a couple of old Scandinavian bands, Satyricon, Ulver. They have a lot of folk-ish melodies or riffs. It's not. I don't call it folk black metal or folk metal, but it's you can make harsh, grim black metal with folk-ish melodies in your guitar riffs, in my opinion.
Oh yeah,
I think I describe it like that.
Yeah, so you're not directly trying to imitate folk music or use like flutes.
Correct.
Right. So that's interesting. Like I don't listen to that much Olver or Satyricon, but I think I hear what you mean. It's got this very lush melodic sound that's different from what people usually go to the Norse stuff for.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. It's if you think of, I don't know if you know the term like Norsecore.
Yeah.
It's people usually associate it with Transylvanian hunger. So that's extremely primitive riffing, and that's not folkish at all, of course. It's just harsh, hateful riffs. But if you look at like I said, Satyricon or the first three Ulver, they have a lot of melodies going on. The songs are really well written. So that's, in my opinion, kind of like a difference between folk-inspired black metal and the ultra-harsh stuff.
Yeah. So the ultra-harsh stuff, I mean, I think for the younger people listening, also Norsecore is a word that was used a lot in the early 2000s to describe, I mean, Dark Throne, more like Dark Throne clone bands, and like Dark Funeral, Marduk kind of stuff. Yeah. You have this funny note that you put on Sagenland, which I think sums up something about the Heidens Hart aesthetic too. You say this album follows the tradition of riff-based, well-written, actual songs.
It's like it's what I meant.
Yeah, and you've got something like that on the Ôfstân demo too. Raw black metal with lots of creative riffs and melodies, and good actual songwriting. How for Sagenland then, how do you try to, if what's at issue is like sort of are you trying to achieve a kind of continuity between the melodies? Do you start from like one riff and try to write related melodic ideas in a track, or?
That's a good description. I'd say a lot of people, and I don't mean it in a bad way necessarily. A lot of bands, they just stick some riffs after each other, and the song is finished. But in my opinion, it's a lot more difficult, but more rewarding to write a flowing song. It doesn't mean it has to be like a first chorus, bridge, chorus, finished. But for example, the first Talker album. Not the Steed album. The songwriting on this album is pure brilliance. What this guy is writing, it's just the songs, how they are written, and the riffs. I have no words for this album. But that's what I mean with songs that are like they have a starting point and a well written body. And and an ending. It's all written. It's all,
And there's something that makes it like you can like look at the Sagenland record probably and be like, I mean, I think I can be like, this is that song. You remember them. I remember them by riffs, right? But I could be like, this is that song with that one riff, right? Like. And there's this kind of core idea in it. Whereas on some records, for sure, you could sort of imagine different riffs going in different songs. It has something to do with the influence with the interest in this kind of folk-ish melody, right? Where if you're writing, I guess, just like chromatic power chord blast beat riffs, you can kind of just put them in whatever order you want.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
That's an interesting thing about certainly Sagenland, and I think a lot of the other Dutch bands, probably. certainly Cultus also, which is your solo thing, which is and Hirvater, which have this focused minimalist approach. That's something I was thinking about. And you could link it to Pest too. All of these bands, to somebody who's new to black metal, let's say, or newer, they'll have a hard time telling them apart, and they'll have a hard time telling what sets the riffs work in a more, the riffs are not as even though there's this emphasis on melody, the riffs are not as flashy, and they do things they'll do things like you'll sit on a note or a chord longer than another band will. It seems to draw a lot of attention to small changes in what you're doing. I was wondering if you could talk a bit about the sort of minimalism or paring back. Sagenland obviously has some big, lush melodies, but I still feel like it's got this simplicity to it.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean. It's something that I've been maybe kind of experimenting with as you said, trying to keep one or two notes, keeping them going throughout the riff, and maybe like kind of make that a trance-ish inducing atmosphere maybe, and have some other melodies go around it. If you know what I mean. So you'll have, for example, on the Cultus album, there's one track that that has an opening riff, which is basically just it's a chord of 3 notes, but 2 of them are changing. And the third one is played throughout the whole riff, and all its repetitions. So for maybe 1 minute, or I don't know, there's this one note that you'll hear the whole time, and the other 2 notes are being switched or alternated.
Is this the one? This is on the record. Yezetald and Zegerunen. Is that something?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, and so which track is that? The one that has like just that kind of slashing minor chord that just rings for a long time and then has bass changing under it?
It's I don't know from my head. I don't know which track it is. It's
for sure. I can just remember one that sounds like how you're describing. You know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah. So you're interested in this kind of like, do you link it to like the use of? Do you see that as like the way the Slavic bands use drone strings in their riffs, or is it's different? Like, because if I listen to like, I'd never heard Hirvater before last night, but I was like, I should check it out, and I can hear like a lot of Graveland in that or Untar. You know.
Yeah. For example, if you listen to "Following the Voice of Blood" by Graveland, there's a couple of. They have this classic kind of pagan black metal riffs, where they have an open A string, and then on the second string they'll play a melody. So you'll have the A string going on the whole time, and then with the other string they'll play a melody, like a track Turisats.
Yes. Yeah.
The intro is like no. That's exactly this kind of typical. The A string is being played the whole time, and it's no, while the other string plays the no. That's kind of it.
Yeah, no, I love that track. I've definitely tried to imitate that too. That's great song. So. Other thought I had in terms of the kind of way that you try to shape melodies and write these kind of things. Do you ever think about like, do you some of the melodies on Sagenland, especially like on the last track, like that da 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 da. You know, it's kind of got this this singable quality. You could basically like, do you come up with riffs ever just in your head or sing them, or is it always on the guitar?
I would say most of them come while playing guitar, but not always. So there might be moments when I'm just doing whatever, packing orders or brushing my teeth or whatever, and they'll pop some melody is going to pop up, and I need to grab my guitar right then because else I'm going to forget about it. So yeah,
for sure.
It both happens. Actually, in the case of this Sagenland track, it was written completely by Floris.
I was going to ask how does the songwriting between you work? Do you just each do different tracks, or? Yeah. So yeah. Oh, I guess I should clarify also for our listeners. Floris is Floris Veltuis, who is also in Asgrau and in Meslamtea, whose new record we reviewed last fall. So this is the other member of Sagenland who does it with Arjan. But yeah, so you guys both seem to have a core role in the songwriting. So how do you manage the collaboration?
Yeah, when we started around 2001, 2002, we started writing really as a duo, like sitting together with our guitars and coming up with stuff and really writing it together. But he moved away, and so like many bands were doing everything through the internet, and he's sending me some riffs and I'll send him some riffs back, and so that has changed. It has changed. So I think on the album, the last track is 100% him. Then the opening track is him. The second one is mine. And then the other three are old style tracks. So yeah.
Nice, where you'll draw riffs from each guy.
Yeah, correct.
Cool. Yeah, he's So maybe one thing that links this band, Sagenland, to the sound in Meslamtea and Asgrau is this use of these kinds of more major key melodies than you'd normally get in a certainly in a Scandinavian band. Do you like that? That to me is almost like a characteristic thing of the Dutch sound. It seems to draw on these brighter melodies without ever going like, just happy. Do you ever remember a time when you started incorporating more of that, or did it just start to happen sort of gradually?
I think it's just stuff that happens. At least my technical knowledge is not. It's not. I would say it's not really good. Not in a way. Not in a way like I'm picturing. I'm going to write this in a major A scale, and then it evolves into a flat C, and then I don't think like this. Not at all. I just write what's on the guitar.
Word. So you're just sort of feeling it out. Yeah.
Totally.
I think, aside from that, here's another way of getting at that idea. I feel like there's a distinct... Maybe the question I'm asking you now would just have more to do with Sagenland as it relates to a sort of specifically Dutch sound or aesthetic. How do you try to describe the mood on that record? Or the feeling? Or or you've got like a landscape painting on the cover. So another thing would be, and you seem very interested in the landscape and local history. What sort of like do you like identify the sounds with any specific places or times of day or like weather? You know what I mean?
Yeah, so it's kind of a question of how much identity, maybe is the word, you can put in your guitar riffs. At least for me, what I'm trying to make, at least with the Sagenland album, was kind of nostalgic. Well, I don't like to use the word depressive, but kind of like, what's the word? If you're thinking back on something, or maybe like a longing back to something in the past.
Yeah, melancholy.
Yeah.
You're attached to something in the past and you're longing for it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the kind of feeling that I have.
For sure.
So, like for example, I think the three acoustic little tracks. I tried to make them. Well, I didn't try to make them sound like this or this, but I think they captured the feeling pretty good.
Yeah, those are really pretty. Is it nostalgia identified with a particular times and places in Dutch history, or is it identified with personal feelings, or is it sort of harder to put your finger on?
It's not that specific, no.
Yeah.
For example, the lyrics from Untar. I would say the lyrical state of mind or subject is the same. I just write about local history, but it can be 50 years ago or it can be 5,000 years ago. So
yes, cool.
It's just stuff from the past that whatever interests me.
Yeah, so with Untar, right? Untar is more about like I think I remember the description was something about like burial mounds or like megalithic tombs.
Yeah, this part of the Netherlands has a couple of dolmen. Do you know this word?
Yes. Yeah.
So and those are 5,000 years old. So that's long before Christianity, long before a lot of stuff.
Yeah, sure.
It's just so interesting. I mean, you can walk through the forest and you see the burial mounds and also the dolmen. And
maybe how would you describe a dolmen? Because some of our listeners won't know what that is, although they've probably heard other words for it.
Yeah, they are like what's in the UK Stonehenge, but a lot smaller.
Yeah, they're kind of like it's not just one rock would be like a menhir or a but like
correct.
Two of they're like structures made with them, right?
Correct. They're like little houses made out of huge, big, heavy stones. So they used to bury important people from tribes in them with their belongings. They would cover them up with one big heavy stone on top. So you have like a little structure, a little house grave. And then they would, in some cases, they would cover all of that up with soil. So you'll have a burial mound, or these the stone graves.
Cool. Yeah. So okay, I see. So some dolmens also have a burial mound built into them.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, and so that's like basically like the most elemental aspects of a house, but made with stone.
Yeah, and it's a grave, so it's not like people lived in it. It's just a grave. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So as far as a thing that connects maybe Sagenland to Kjeld is this interest in really specific regional history, which is interesting because if you're from the U.S., right, and the U.S. is way too big for its own good, right? But so we think of the Netherlands as a small country, but you seem particularly devoted to this region of Sagenland, right?
Yeah, this is actually very interesting to me. I've been in the U.S. Twice, and it's a huge country. But when I think of Europe, indeed you have these very small areas, maybe, or like for example, like Frisia or the part where I live. It seems there are just a lot more and smaller regions.
Yes, that makes sense. They did some sort of genetic survey in the UK a couple of years back. This was like some big thing, they published in the BBC or whatever, where they found that like a surprisingly large number of people in the UK outside the cities could be basically traced in their regions back, like 1,000 years or more, like there's a little bit of movement, but you sort of stay kind of where you are. America drives, we've got our kind of economy and our kind of allergy to history and this kind of idea of constantly moving on. And it people see it as normal to move all over the place for work.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense because there's probably no more, just very little original American inhabitants left. Almost every inhabitant of the U.S. is from somewhere else, from Europe or, actually from Europe.
Yeah. Well, yes, exactly. So, from Europe and now from a lot of places, and so it's. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's this kind of if you want to place the history of the, I don't know what, dominant culture might be putting it too strongly, but the sort of the history of the sort of the culture out of which the United States grew, right? This kind of like Anglo-Protestant modern world thing. Yeah, its history only goes back. It's all the most annoying parts of British culture, and its history goes back 400 years. Yeah, for sure. So, in Europe that hasn't, although many of the same historical processes have happened there, the thread hasn't been cut in the same way.
Yeah, it's interesting. For example, you can spot this really well in dialects and accents of people. I mean, if I drive my car with half an hour, people will have a different accent, and they will say, you are from there and there. And if I drive to the other side if I drive to Amsterdam or Rotterdam, they're gonna notice my accent right away, and they're gonna call me a farmer. Because my accent is I'm from the east of the Netherlands, on the border region with Germany, and my accent is like everyone would say it's a farmer accent.
Do you come from a farming family?
No. But it's a rural area over here, so people are going to say, you're all farmers. Yeah,
no, for sure. That's that is, I did get that impression that the scene around Heidens Hart is very much not the Amsterdam scene. Is that true?
Yeah, 100%. I was born on the countryside, and I like to visit Amsterdam or Rotterdam or The Hague, but that's it. I visit there 1 or 2 days, but then it's just so crowded and.
One question would be like, so you were saying about Kjeld, right? They seem to identify with this Frisian heritage, and as you say, you couldn't really describe Frisian as a mix of English and Dutch and German because it grew up at the same time as them or before modern German and modern, So it's like their region doesn't really. It's got its own identity, and it doesn't really belong in any of those big nation states. Do you feel like do you feel more connected to, say, like, do you feel connected more to where you're from than the Netherlands as a whole?
Um,
You know what I mean? Or is it more like both of them because where you're from is in the Netherlands?
yeah, I get it. There, you could notice a different, different kind of attitude in people in the cities. People will be more antisocial, or well, maybe not antisocial, but they'll start. Well, that's also kind of interesting because the part where I live, there are hardly any shows at all. So,
I know. I came up in New York City, and when I went to shows there, a lot of it was standing around with your arms crossed. So. And then I moved back elsewhere, and then I was like, oh dang, this is fun. It's So shows basically are in the cities. Here would be another way of getting at it. So like, how would you? So when I think of the Dutch scene, I'm basically thinking of Heidens Hart and these related bands that are all playing this spectrum of stuff that goes from like heathen barbarian black metal to kind of this more melancholy romantic black metal, like Sagenland, right? And they all kind of mixed together, right? A lot of them have Asgrau has bits of both. But like there are like other parts of the Dutch scene, and so how does what you have connect to them? So for instance, is like so bands like Turia and Laster, those are city bands, right? I feel like I know like Fluisteraars you're somewhat connected to, right?
No, not really.
No?
No, I know. I think I know one of them by face, but no, not really connected. No.
Maybe I associate it musically because of the sort of rural thing and the kind of psychedelic vibe. But so those bands are their own kind of arty kind of.
Yeah.
That's its own thing.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say as well. Arty. Yeah, at least Laster is definitely from the city, and those guys I know. I used to work with them, and I think we have some differences in opinions and motivations to make music, which is fine. Everyone has their own motivations, but they seem to go for this arty picture. Or
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's a little more. I think there's definitely an art to what your group of bands does, but it's understated, and it's not related to city art culture, or like I think like Laster's a really good band, but they're it's definitely it definitely belongs. It's definitely more like a good version of art school black metal, right? It's Yeah, so okay, so that's its own thing. Other thing. So then let's talk about, we're talking about the Dutch scene. We could also shift to the label. Why don't we talk about the history of, why don't we talk about the early roots of the Dutch scene, and then we'll bridge that over to the label, because it'd be great to talk about Heidens Hart's history. So maybe we could set this in, like, you founded the label in 1998. What were things like back then?
What I remember is a kind of enthusiasm. You're getting letters from unknown people from all over the world, and discovering new bands, totally new sounds, and discovering new people. Yeah, that's how it was like.
So you were, at that point, more turned outside. You were focused on contacts outside the Netherlands and being in touch with this broader black metal scene that was emerging?
Yeah, I think so. I started the label to promote my own band, Cultus. I wasn't looking for contacts specifically outside or inside of the country, just whoever. Yeah.
Were you the only person you knew basically doing things like that at that time and where you were?
No. No, there were a couple of small labels, but they all ceased to exist except for one maybe.
Oh, I was thinking more even in terms of bands, like Cultus. So, like, were there any other, who were the other active Dutch bands at that time? Because I feel like a lot of the names I know started to come more around the 2000s.
At that time, maybe Funeral Winds, Mordijhot from the south of the Netherlands.
Yes, Mordijhot is cool.
At that time, Tartaros from the Dutch one. Countess, of course.
Countess is a name that you don't hear very much anymore, but when I was getting into the music, Countess was pretty well known. For people who have not heard of them, how would you explain Countess? Because it's not a kind of sound you hear much these days.
No, they just released a brand new album, actually today. I would describe it as a kind of mix of heavy metal and black metal with a heavy Manowar vibe. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't associate them with. I'm gonna have to go back. People would always talk about Countess as sounding a lot like Bathory.
Yeah, but they changed the sound. They've been around forever, but they changed the sound a bit. They started as an extremely primitive battery influenced band. There's the first album. It's like total under the sign of the Black Mark and The Return. But after the first album, basically everyone left except Orlok. And they did a couple more primitive albums, but then the sound started to evolve in a kind of more epic-ish, more bombastic sounds.
I'm gonna have to check that out. I love Manowar. So, at that time, then, when you founded the label, like, that would have been right when. That would have been like the Norwegian scene and the Swedish scene would have been. Well, the Norwegian scene would have been, on its last legs. The Swedish scene would have been still pretty strong. Were you in touch with any of those bands at that time?
No.
All right.
At that time, there were a couple of obscure chat rooms. Yeah, well, now that I think of it, there were a couple of Scandinavians at least.
So just people, people from the scene that you were generally in touch with on these chat rooms or whatever.
Yeah, correct, yeah.
Mm-hmm. In terms of like building collaborations or whatever, then it was probably hard to find people to play with.
The scene in the Netherlands, also at that time, you had in the East, in the West, you had there's one famous venue in Rotterdam, which was around already then for maybe already more than 10 years. So there was a big scene of people at that time already in Rotterdam. You have the Funeral Winds guys from Sinister.
Word. Was Sinister a death metal band?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, wait. Look at this. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a... Sinister as... Yeah, I know that logo. Yeah. Cross the sticks.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. Okay, so it sounds then maybe more like you started your own thing in your own region in 98, and you've kind of just been doing your own thing since then. Is that?
Yeah. I would describe it as independent for sure since the beginning. Yeah.
Got it.
Yep. I started doing demos and producing them at the local supermarket using the Xerox machine to make tape covers.
Awesome.
So that's how it started back then, and it was totally independent, and well, it still is.
For sure. So in terms of the development of the label, I was wondering if you could talk about maybe if you had to pick like maybe 3 or 4 iconic releases since the beginning, that you would say were important to the label, what would those be? Doesn't have to be the ones that, sold the most or that got the best response. Just things that you think are really representative.
Maybe at least one of my personal favorites is the Ancestors' Blood, When the Forest Calls.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, I need to see a list from all this stuff because I don't remember it.
So, well, tell us about that. So that's Ancestors' Blood is a so When the Forest Calls. You've done a split with them too, right? As your daughter.
Correct. Yeah. I think Ancestors' Blood is like total Norwegian style sound. Also from the 90s, maybe like Gehenna or Obtained Enslavement or the first Dimmu Borgir. They have this big epic keyboard sound.
Mm-hmm. I could hear Gehenna or Gehenna. Yeah, it's kind of slow, right? Or slow relative to what we usually think of Norwegian black metal as.
Yeah, correct. It's got a lot of mid-tempo parts or upbeat. It's not ultra fast blasting. No.
Yeah. I often associate the Heidens Hart bands or bands like that with Hades and maybe Treldom. Are those?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Are those bands that have been influences?
Treldom for sure. Well, maybe not in a way like I want to sound like Treldom, but all 3 albums from Treldom to me are really, really good. So maybe, for sure.
Well, we could talk about your work with Pest, right? Or I guess that's another part of the label, really, is it seems like you do a lot of reissues. Now, it seems like last year you put out a fair number of reissues, and the year before you were reissuing all this stuff by Pest, And then
Yeah.
also a bunch of stuff by more... Oh, wait, before we go there, in terms of label history, talk about Blackdeath. Because
Mm-hmm.
you've been releasing stuff by them for a long time, right? And they sound kind of different from some of the rest of the stuff on your label.
Yeah, yeah. I approached guys from Blackdeath regarding their debut.
Mm-hmm.
And I did a tape version from their debut.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there on, I think they sent me at the time their latest album. Or they were looking for a new label because, well, they didn't have any.
Mm-hmm.
So I released that album Phobos 2013, and I booked a couple of shows for them. Basically the first tour for them outside of Russia.
Oh, nice.
And yeah, their music is quite different than what I usually release. But I really like the music first, but I really appreciate their dedication to what they're doing. They really have a completely unique style of guitar riffs. Their own style of vocals and bass playing and drums. It's totally unique and it's highly underrated. And
Yeah.
I totally support and respect those guys, and I want to give them my support by pressing their albums.
Awesome. So it's been a long time since I've heard Blackdeath. I think when I first heard them, I was too young to really get it. How would you explain their sound? Because it doesn't sound like Slavic black metal,
No,
particularly.
not at all. No, correct. They started the old first two albums are extremely primitive and harsh.
Mm-hmm.
But if you listen to the last 4 or 5 albums, I would describe it as maybe avant-garde style riffs, but without the in a way avant-garde to me sounds like it's well, maybe not easy listening, but it's stuff that you can understand easily. Like maybe
Yes.
yeah, I don't know if that sounds like I want. Maybe like for example, if you listen to Wetbuens Ende or Virus, to me that's avant-garde style riffs, but it's not extremely harsh, unlistenably crazy. But if you listen to the last 4 Blackdeath albums, to me they have it's really avant-garde riffs and melodies and song structures, but it's not produced like it's easy on the ears. It's really harsh and hateful and I'm not
I
sure
think
if
I
that
think I
makes
see.
sense.
No, I think I totally see what you mean. That's honestly kind of in line with how we think about this stuff on the show. It's like often the stuff that seems the most arty, that tells you how arty it is the least interesting. And often the stuff that gets billed as avant-garde is not particular, really polished. I mean, if you think about like Deathspell Omega, right? Good band, great band. But like you could hardly say that all these bands influenced by Deathspell Omega, they play these like really dissonant, skronky sounding chords, but it's such polished music and you know exactly what you're going to get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's correct. Yes.
Yeah, and so Blackdeath maybe uses... Blackdeath writes more in like a riff-oriented tradition that comes from Norway, right? They're sort of like, or something like that. They write like these really dissonant, bizarre riffs. Is that...
Yeah, with kind of staccato riffs even at sometimes. Then the vocals is this kind of screeching vocal style in German, the guy sings writes everything in German, which is of course totally strange for a Russian band.
Yeah.
Yeah, just the whole package makes the band, yeah, strange.
No, for sure. That's so it's idiosyncratic. Yeah, I remember it sounds kind of like death metal, but it's definitely not black death metal.
But maybe I would recommend, if some people are interested, if you check the latest album, Phantasmhassmagorie, it may have the least harsh production since maybe 4 or 5 albums. It has been mixed by Thomas from Abigor, and he added a couple of keyboards, and overall the sound is a bit less harsh, but the compositions are still maniacal and just crazy, but the sound is a little bit easier.
Go,
So I guess what strikes me about that is its clarity compared to other really dissonant stuff. There's a continuous sense of melody, but the melodies are just really, really harsh and weird. And how do you distinguish the writing on here from their earlier stuff?
The old stuff also has a kind of strange chords, but the song structures are a lot more primitive. The song structures go to this Transylvanian hunger style, A B. So it's a lot less complex, and together with the more harsh production, the first two records are really extreme.
Does this come from Darkthrone? It's very hard to even place exactly what sort of. I could hear how this relates to like like the songs on Transylvanian or not Transylvanian Hunger on Under a Funeral Moon or something.
Mm-hmm. Now, if you ask the guy about his riffs, he'll just say something like, "I'm influenced by Burzum, or some other, or Darkthrone, or Mayhem." So he's not influenced by, as far as I know at least, he's not influenced by any of these modern avant-garde like Deathspell Omega. I don't think he's influenced by that at all. He may not even know those albums.
That's really cool.
Yeah, and it's, to me, it's kind of odd because those riffs have nothing to do with Burzum.
Well, you've got to hear. My guess is that you hear a different thing in Burzum. You hear the sort of pagan folky sound, but there's some pretty ugly riffs in Burzum.
Yeah, actually, Burzum is, of course, a unique band, even just music-wise, because his stuff goes from this primitive black metal to this upbeat rhythm stuff, and then the philosophy monotonous material, very atmospheric.
Mm-hmm.
So he did a lot of different styles, actually.
Yeah, I mean, there's all these. I feel like there's, at the beginning of the sound in Norway in the early 90s, there were all these different variations on it made by this group of bands, and when it gets picked up by other people, they pick up on very small parts of that, and you get like the Norsecore or whatever.
Yeah.
Whereas, I guess something that ties this guy to like, this guy's picking up on very specific things about those that, like, I guess I can hear how this relates to Darkthrone and Burzum and Mayhem.
Mm-hmm.
But those are all, he's hearing something completely different in them.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of the Heidens Hart bands kind of do that too, where you guys have this alternate history of black metal. You know what I mean? It's like different Norwegian bands are important to you, right? You're more interested in like Ôfstân than,
Yeah, that's correct. A lot of the old Norwegian bands, they started out as primitive death thrash, maybe like the very old Darkthrone. The very old Immortal is like death thrash stuff. Who else? What have we got? Of course, the bands Satyricon before they went under the name Satyricon, it was also primitive death thrash. So I guess all those bands kind of started with that sound, and then they evolved into their own style with their own riffs, and
I feel like Satyricon is a band that's not talked about much anymore. I've never been able to get that into them. But, well, here's a weird thing. Satyricon and Ulver are both from outside the core circles of, like, the 90s, right? They were both seen as been a little bit later. Or I think they were, like, a little bit younger than those other guys.
I think they were less involved in the scene around Helvet shop.
Yeah, that's kind of what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, fair enough. Makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. So he's got his kind of alternate history of black metal where he picks up on all the parts of it that are, I don't know, the least entertaining.
Yeah, that makes sense.
There's no desire to please, and it's all these aspects of the early bands that kind of relate to death metal, but definitely aren't death metal. Yeah, and there's something really ambitious too about when people ask you what you're influenced by. There's something really it's like, you know, if you're a rock band, if someone is like, "Hey, what are you influenced by?" You're just like, Elvis, right? You know, or you know, the Beatles, right? There's something.
Correct. I get it. Yeah.
It's very confident. A lot of. One of the other a label that we've sort of collaborated a lot with, but one of our friends, there's a death metal label called Hessian Firm. They do really good stuff, and a lot of their bands are very focused on just like basically trying not to even imitate stuff from after 1995, but like taking it not in terms of like these, but trying to do original music. Based on like they're just like, okay, we just like the best death metal, so we just listen to like, you know, Sentenced North from Here and, you know, Morbid Angel.
Yeah.
Try to build it all from that. Other bands, related to the label and its history. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about Pest, because that band seems important to you and maybe also important to the general wing of black metal that interests you most. Pest is maybe the best example I got from you. I got their first record from you last year, and today I went through and listened to a little bit more of their later stuff. Pest is like the extreme of this really disciplined, minimal sound. But how did you find them? What set them apart to you? Because you've probably been listening to them since like 2004 or whenever they started out, earlier than that.
Yeah, earlier I got their first demo from an old distro at that time, so 2001 or something. I have no idea. And what I liked at that time was the vocals, this hysterical Burzum style, high pitched vocal style. And the guitar riffs were like. I don't know. Just something that stood out to me. And then a couple of years later, they released a Vado Mori album. And when I got that one, I listened to it just all the time. They're doing the style of riffs that I like. But the overall sound is a bit more aggressive, maybe because of the vocal style. There's more blast beats. It's faster, just overall more aggressive. That I don't know why, but I think that maybe what I like about them.
Yeah, it's definitely crazy. It's it sounds a little bit like. You described them as on your reissue of their first record. On this album, Pest displayed how they are prime forerunners of original European black metal that does not sound like Burzum or Darkthrone.
Yeah, it's because you'll have many bands that do the Burzum riffs or the Darkthrone riffs. Yeah, in my opinion, They sounded unique since they started. Like this demo that I mentioned.
Yeah.
To me, at least, I don't know. I'm not telling the truth. I mean, I'm just telling my opinion. But to me, they sounded already original at that demo. So,
Well, it's interesting too because often you build more. I don't know, you add things or whatever. But if anything, their riffing style, especially on that first record, is like just as minimal, if not more minimal, than Burzum or Darkthrone.
Yeah, maybe the songs are not. It's not hugely complex stuff. No. No, correct.
And it's difficult to do that. Like, it's difficult to sort of listen to these two super primitive. You have these super primitive Norwegian bands that then you set out to do so. You're just do something equally primitive, and it starts from a completely different place. I was thinking about Pest as maybe like, what would you say about the idea that Pest is black metal that has basically nothing to do with heavy metal? That it reminds me the most of like Misfits, Earth AD, hardcore.
Yeah, maybe. That could be. I think the main songwriter maybe into those kind of genres as well. So there's a good possibility that some of that seeped into his songwriting.
Did you listen to much hardcore or punk?
No.
No. That's interesting because, like, there is this so many of your bands and the bands at Heidens Hart have this kind of focused minimalism, emphasis on, like, how can changing one chord or two chords make a riff unique? That all, to me, I associate with the best hardcore songwriting. And sort of... What?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sort of just simpler song structures and things like that, but, like, the good bands, right? There are tons of awful hardcore bands, right? But the good bands are, like, trying to get a lot of mileage out of deliberately limited parts.
I have to admit, no, I'm not familiar with hardcore and punk at all. Really, nothing.
Interesting. So, like, so what are your feelings then about, like, I think, I think in some ways I think that Heidens Hart is, I suppose, the wing of black metal I come from in the U.S. Most of the people now who are really, in my generation, I'm 32, right, who are really serious about black metal come from some sort of punk or hardcore background. Some of those guys, some of the people from the punk scene became total posers, right? They became Cascadian black metal or whatever. But, like, other people got into other shit. But these sort of punk-influenced black metal people really like Pest and really like Cultus. Because they have this sort of minimal, just, that sort of 1-2 drumming. Boop, da, boop, da, boop, da, boop, da, boop, da.
Yeah, it's like, maybe that's, especially in Pest, maybe that's what can appeal to punk or hardcore audience, yeah.
So what do you feel? So then how do you relate to, like, heavy metal then? Because when I hear some of the stuff in like do you like stuff like new wave of British heavy metal or thrash metal or what? How do you feel about that sort of thing?
A couple of bands in heavy metal genre were like gateway bands into metal for me when I was 16 or 14 or whatever. I would buy tapes from Iron Maiden and Megadeth, but I didn't stick around in heavy metal bands all that long. So I know a couple of just the big names. Yeah, Iron Maiden, Megadeth, and
Yeah. So outside of black metal, then, what are you listening to?
A bit of death and then doom metal, but also neo folk and a bit of jazz, a bit of Nick Cave.
Nice. So what kind of... Okay, interesting. So, like, yeah, neo folk. You put out that Wolfsonsman album a few years ago.
Which one? Sorry.
Wolfsonsman. Did you?
Yeah. Wolfsonsman. Yes. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Wolfsonsman. That makes sense. Yes. Yeah.
Just brilliant. What this guy? It's kind of how I described Pest as being European black metal and not being a Burzum clone. To me, Volkensman is doing neo-folk without being a Death in June clone.
Yes.
I mean, I really love some Death in June albums, but it's got this minimalistic songwriting which everybody copies. But Volkensman to me is like really well-written conceptual songs with the beginning and the end, and yeah, it's really exceptionally good.
Yeah, each song on that record is different.
Yeah. It's not like it's not 3 chords in a riff, a couple of repetitions, and that's it. No.
Yes, Death in June. Yeah, I'm a huge Death in June fan, but certainly some of their albums are better than others, and it's really hard to imitate because and everyone. It's so deceptive because like those records that are just about the strummy 3-chord guitar are actually about everything else, like the vocals and the lyrics and the weird noises in the background.
Correct. Yeah. Yes. Exactly. You would think the guy of the music is just 3-chord riffs and that's it, but yeah, he's got all kinds of effects going on in the background. Also, the actual lyrics are of course part of the songwriting, and his lyrics are very good. And you're correct. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite Death in June record?
Rose Clouds, probably.
That's one of the early neo-folk ones, right? Yeah, no, yes. I know that one. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that one has some very catchy tunes on it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think from that era, I prefer What Ends When the Cymbals Shatter, but yeah,
sure. Of course. It's the second.
Yeah. But yeah, those are definitely 2 of the records that are imitated the most, and that's where everyone goes wrong. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so Volkensman, it's like he's trying to do a specifically kind of English folk sound.
Yeah, as far as I know, his lyrics are very researched. Mm-hmm. He even included or not included, but he wrote a little book to accompany the lyrics from the second album. So it's like he created one big story, and then with the story he wrote the book and the lyrics all about that subject. So it's a big project, or a big whole, so to say.
Yeah, sort of a fully complete artwork, 360.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, and I guess in that way it is. It's like he's imitating the method of Death in June, because that's Death in June's method, but he's not imitating the style at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, yeah. And aside from him, you have some other contacts with the English scene. So, which and I think you were dealing with them long before there was a solid UKBM scene. But like you did Forefather and Ildra. You've just done a lot of Ildra reissues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been working with Ildra since their first or second demo. Mm-hmm. And then I did the debut, and it's one of my best selling bands from the label. I think their style is also, it's really well written, and he also makes a lot of work. He puts a lot of work into the details of the lyrics and the concept behind the album. So he uses the Old English language, mm-hmm. which is not common. So you have to research about it first. Mm-hmm. So you have to put a lot of effort into creating a whole concept like that. So
for sure. And he was doing that. Yeah, I mean in 2005 4. That's, I mean, the guy from Volkensman, Dan Kapp, that was, he was in Winterfell. He plays in Winterfell too, but I think Ildra was doing that before Winterfell.
Yes. Yep.
And they sound more like, Ildra is more of a kind of epic Bathory Graveland kind of band, right?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah. We talk on this show about how I like stuff that's like mid-tempo barbarian bashing. Ildra's very much like that. That's a super mysterious project, too. Are you able to give any hints as to any connections that guy might have, or do you have to be totally...
Yeah, no, I'm afraid I can't.
For sure. Understood. Part of the mystique. I just figured I'd ask.
Yeah, sure. Fair enough.
Yeah, so Ildra's cool. Forefather also one of the best kept secrets underground.
Totally. The Forefather is, again, to me, a typical example of writing riffs and writing songs. They improved with every album, really. The first one or two, it's pretty primitive, A-B style riffing. But they really evolved, and the way of songwriting on Steadfast, for example, just to me it's just pure brilliance. Just how the songs flow, and again the lyrics and vocal pattern writing, and yeah.
Steadfast has a very rock and roll quality to it.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. It's upbeat, it's fast, it's, maybe, yeah.
It's like Motorhead, British heavy metal.
I'm not a big fan of Motorhead, so...
Oh, no?
No.
Interesting. What don't you like about Motorhead?
It's maybe too primitive, or just...
I get what you mean. I think I was bullshitting with my friend a while ago, and I think we were, I think we both agreed that Motorhead might be a little bit overrated, which is a blasphemous thing to say, but
yeah, it's there's a couple of big bands that I don't like a Motorhead, AC/DC, or Venom. I don't care if I just no.
Oh, you just don't. You know what it is? You just want stuff that sounds. You don't like stuff that sounds bluesy. You want stuff that sounds European.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I mean, I think like Motorhead's a weird band because, well, they were certainly really important to me when I was a kid because it was. I guess at that time I listened to Black Flag, a hardcore band, or and Motorhead were two classic bands I knew. And Motorhead was way closer to what I ended up liking, sort of just. But I feel like you could count on, if your interests are in black metal or extreme metal more generally, I feel like I could count maybe 10. Motorhead's put out a lot of albums. They've been very consistent in some ways, but I could probably count 10 or 15 songs from that I would really rate as ones that I really like. It's very much like a rock band. It's very oriented to, I feel like, I guess what I mean is I like the Motorhead songs that are the most stupid and primitive. There we go. So Overkill is 3 chords for 6 minutes. The double bass pedal. I like that. But there's songs they have that are rock and roll songs or boogie woogie songs. Don't like. Yeah, don't like as much. I like them just as solid rock and roll. Yeah. But yeah, I feel like Forefathers got a bit of that, just in the sense that they have these, on that record at least, they're these kind of double pedal beats and these kind of sort of hook-oriented vocals.
To me, maybe the later albums, not so much Motorhead, but there's a kind of power metal-ish vibe because of all the double bass works, and maybe the style of riffing here and there.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So, like, when you think of... So, that's actually a thing that's been happening on the shows that my co-host, the death metal guy, whereas I grew up listening to, like, hardcore and stuff, he grew up, like, he was a kid with really long hair. He, like, listened to power metal and stuff, right? So, we've had some unusual comparisons from him of things that I would never associate with power metal. He's been like, oh, this sounds like power metal. Because all I basically know from that is stuff like Manila Road, which is American. So, like, for you, what would be your, like, power metal reference points from Europe?
Maybe Sabaton. It's this horrible, over-the-top... power metal, heavy metal. I don't even know.
I mean, Sabaton is fun, but yes, it's So you're not a power metal fan. You just think it sounds a little like power metal. Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and also obviously those guys are huge Iron Maiden fans.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess the one last label-related question. You did a reissue last year. It seems like, so, like, what other labels, I think, spend a lot of time focused on putting out new stuff. You devote a lot of time to reissues. So, for instance, last year you reissued, in addition to the Pest stuff and sort of old Ildra stuff and whatever, which there is kind of this cult demand for, and which, you were kind of played with Pest for a while and whatnot. You often reissue stuff that you think is really important and that there appears to be virtually no audience for. So I'm thinking of...
Story of my life.
Yeah, so I'm thinking of Rock and Woinar.
Yeah.
From last year. Tell me about... I played Rock for a few... I ordered that record from you, and I really like it. And I played that for a couple of my friends who are into, like, pretty fucked up shit, right? And they heard that and they were like, I don't think this is good for your mental health, bro. But to me, Rock is really fun.
It's also one of the demos that I got that I heard around the 2000s. This ontgrafenis, it means like de-burial. It's a word that doesn't really exist. But that demo is just so extreme. The vocals are really extreme. The music is so pure, primitive, and hateful. So I listened to this for maybe for 15 years on occasions, and then I found out that their drummer was someone who I knew already for a long time.
Oh.
And but the drummer joined later because that original old demo is with the drum computer, and it's it just adds to the pure sick atmosphere. It's just it's really, really extreme. But anyway, I found out that he played later recordings, and so I asked him about doing some reissues but the band was by then long split up, but I was allowed to put one song of them, an unreleased song, on a compilation, and then I wanted to do a reissue from this demo. But two of the three guys, they got together and just figured, I don't want to do a reissue. I want to write new stuff. And so they came up with that album with the yellow cover. And it's it's just basically just as extreme as then.
Oh, is it? I haven't heard the yellow cover one.
You have the black and white cover.
Oh yeah, no, I ordered Aunt Gravenus Duisternus.
Yeah, That's the demo. The side A is the demo.
That's what we thought there was a drum machine. So what it sounds like is like there's the demo side with the drum machine, which has these bizarre beats that almost sound like industrial beats.
Yeah, it's sick. It's really what's the word? Like bothered.
Yeah, no,
it's bothering me how extreme it is.
It's fucked up, yeah. And on the second side, it's like there. On the second side, it seems to be a live recording with drums.
Yeah, correct. It's a rehearsal recording actually.
Yeah, and so the funny thing is, the rehearsal recording is, by normal black metal standards, way more polished and normal sounding than the demo.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, the demo is really extreme in everything. Yeah, in every way.
I feel like I like to dance to that record. I just put it on and stand in my living room, sort of bobbing around like a goblin.
I'll tell the guy, and he'll come get you for sure. Because
no. Opposed to dancing. So.
Who knows?
Yeah. But
and the other one, Voinar, is also it's basically the same story. This exact demo. I was listening to it in 99 or 2000 or whenever it came out, and I listened to it just on occasions for 20 years. And I just figured, well, all my tapes are wearing out. I want to put this on vinyl. So I found a way to contact him, and he said right away, yeah, for sure you can put this on vinyl. And I was actually in Poland when I got these records from the factory.
Oh, cool!
So I drove to Poland to meet with the guy and give him his share of copies, and that was cool.
Yeah, so Voinar is like epic dungeon synth or something.
Yeah, I think at the time that the word dungeon synth may not have existed, but you could say maybe it's like a mix of dungeon synth and folk music ish, something.
Yeah, it's kind of, for listeners, it's maybe sort of like somebody just took Graveland interludes and made a whole album out of them.
Yeah.
But but with more, I mean, they don't just sound like interludes, right?
Yeah, correct. I get it. Yeah.
Here's a classic fanzine question, then. What do you think about nowadays black metal? What are your thoughts on on current trends or the current scene? It's, be as rude as you want.
Yeah. Nah. Well, the thing kind of is I'm not too. Yeah, I mean, I have a label, so I deal with a lot of people and a lot of bands every day, but I kind of keep a distance to the latest hype and the latest trend and stuff that people are talking about now. They want it now, and tomorrow they'll have already forgotten about it. So I would say my opinion about the current scene is what I always think is I'm not too involved with whatever people like right now, and if people want to copy Watain or Dead Spell Omega or whatever band that is hot right now, sure, go ahead, but well, yeah, I work with the bands that I respect and like, and they may not be hip or trendy or bestsellers.
Yeah, yes. For sure.
Like I said, I keep some distance in a way between everything that's going on, maybe.
Pamiętaj o tym, kim naprawdę jesteś. Pamiętaj o swojej słowiańskiej przeszłości. A wówczas rzecz trudna łatwą ci będzie.